Have you ever watched someone rewrite your past with a single sentence and a colder smile than the room could hold? If a stranger walked in and said, "I know who she really is," would you believe them? Or the person who has been faithfully sweeping your floors and putting pieces of your life back where you dropped them? You're trash, Jimena. Trash that can't do anything right. Estela Castañeda's voice cut the air like a blade. The law office froze. Heads lifted from magazines. A man paused mid-swipe on his phone screen, the cursor blinking in an empty email he would never finish. A receptionist stopped breathing. On the other side of the glass wall, a junior lawyer with shaky hands pretended to print something he didn't need, only to make noise that no longer covered anything. Jimena Morales clutched a damp rag in both hands and willed her knees not to buckle. 26 years old, 3 years faithful in this office. Early every morning, floors shining, windows clear, bathrooms that smelled like lemon and thyme. She could not think of a single thing she had done wrong. Doña Estela, I don't understand. What did I do? What did you do? Estela let out a bitter laugh that sounded like broken glass in a sink. You stuck your nose where it didn't belong and gave opinions about matters for attorneys. That was a lie. Jimena only ever answered where the bathrooms were or which door led to the conference room with the cold air. She knew where the good pens were kept, which partners took their coffee with sugar, which clients needed an extra napkin because nerves made hands shake. People liked her because she paid attention. Even the partners said so. I only help when someone asks, Jimena said, voice small. Shut your mouth. Estela slapped the desk and blew papers into the air. You are nothing but a stupid maid who doesn't know her place. Silence sat heavy in the office. Doña Marta, the receptionist, shook her head once. Two paralegals stared down at their shoes. One client whispered to another, then realized there were things he should never whisper out loud and swallowed the rest. You're fired. Pack your things and get out of my sight. Jimena's legs trembled. Her grandmother, Alma, needed heart medication. It was expensive. This job was the only money that came in. Their tiny kitchen had a jar where coins lived between paydays, and it was never heavy enough. In a life where every coin had a plan, there was no plan for this. Please, Doña Estela. My grandmother is sick. We need... I don't care. Estela's smile was small and sharp. People like you always have excuses. I'm not interested. The room dimmed around the edges. Street noise fell away. Even the elevator seemed to stop its breathing. Jimena swallowed tears so hard her throat hurt and nodded. Está bien, she whispered. I'll get my things. Her locker was small. It held rubber gloves she'd bought with her own money, a bottle of alcohol, a hair clip, a photo of her and Alma smiling in front of a grocery store, and a bag with a handful of coins that would not get her home. She put everything into a plastic sack while Estela watched like a cat watches a bird behind glass. And don't even think about asking me for a recommendation, Estela added, savoring the cruelty. If anyone calls about you, I will tell them the truth. An hour later, Jimena sat at a bus stop with the plastic bag in her lap. The sky pressed down dark and flat. Rain started slow and then remembered what it wanted to be. She closed her eyes and tried to hold on to the memory of her first day in this building 3 years ago. The day she had spilled water on the desk of the most important lawyer and thought she would be destroyed. Only to hear the man say kindly, "It's all right, Hia. It happens." She had worked harder after that. She had made sure it would never happen again. She had made herself useful in 100 small ways that no one paid for and everyone needed. Now she was wet and without a plan. Dios mío. And now, she murmured into the rain, hugging the bag tighter. Alma always said, God does not abandon people who work honestly. Jimena wanted to believe it. Right now it felt like everyone had. A black Mercedes pulled up to the curb like it belonged to a different story. The window slid down. A man in his 30s leaned toward the opening. Dark hair, clean suit, serious face that did not look offended by the rain, concern in his eyes that did not look practiced. Excuse me, he said gently. Weren't you at that office a moment ago? Jimena scrubbed at her wet cheeks with a sleeve. See? I saw what happened, he said. She had no right to treat you that way. The kindness hurt almost as much as the humiliation. You saw? She asked, feeling her face burn under cold water. I did. It made me angry. He glanced at the rain. Get in. I'll drive you home. Her grandmother always said not to get into cars with strangers. Her grandmother also never pictured this much rain or this kind of day. I don't want to get your seat wet, Jimena murmured. Then we will wipe it later, he said with a small smile. Please, you'll get sick. She hesitated, then opened the door. The warm air smelled like leather and something clean, and it felt like a betrayal to be grateful for it. Gracias, she said, barely audible. You don't have to thank me, he replied, adjusting the vents. What's your name? Jimena. Jimena Morales. Mucho gusto, Jimena. I'm Mateo. Mateo Sarmiento. He put the car in gear. Where do you live? It's far, she said. Iztapalapa. If you could leave me at a metro station. I'm not dropping you at a station in this weather, he said, gentle but sure. Give me your address. I'll take you home. On the drive, words came out of her in small pieces. Alma, the old house with thin walls and a strong heart, the cost of pills that made the month shorter, the way she loved her job because it let her make things tidy and calm, even if the people were not, the suddenness of the humiliation, the coins in the bag, the longer rain now. Mateo listened the way people in offices never listen because it isn't in a job description. He came from a world where people said the right thing and often did something else, a world where strategy was currency and kindness was usually a performance. There was nothing performed about the way she spoke. And you? She asked shyly, turning the attention away from her pain because that was how she was built. What were you doing there? Meeting in the building next door, he answered. I was walking out when I heard all of that. He shook his head. I've never seen anyone be spoken to like that. It was inhuman. They turned onto her street. The houses sat shoulder to shoulder, paint faded and lines strong. Children's voices lived in yards where dogs napped and neighbors knew the news without reading it. Mateo pulled up in front of the number she gave. Here? He asked. Si. She squeezed the plastic bag. Thank you, Senor Mateo. You saved my day. She reached for the door handle. Jimena, he said softly. Wait. She looked back. He had turned in his seat to face her fully, as if the conversation had come to a place where he needed to see her eyes to continue. I have an idea, he said. I run a tech company in the center. I need someone who can keep us organized, someone who sees things before they break, someone who cares about the small stuff that becomes the big stuff. Would you like to work there? Her eyes went wide like the first time a child sees the ocean. Senor, you don't even know me. I saw how you reacted when she humiliated you, he said. You didn't yell. You didn't cause a scene. You didn't disrespect anyone, even when you were being disrespected. That tells me something about who you are. I only know how to clean, Jimena said honestly. I don't know anything about computers. An office is an office, he replied with a small smile. We need someone responsible, punctual, careful. You are those things, and you can learn the rest. Tears came back, but they were different now. Is this really happening? She whispered more to herself than to him. How much? I mean, what is the pay? 10,000 to start, he said. Transport support, grocery vouchers, health insurance after 3 months. It was more than she made before. It was medicine. It was Alma's tests at the clinic the doctor kept asking for. It was the difference between choosing and not choosing. I accept, she said, voice breaking. When can I start? Monday, 8 a.m. He pulled a pen and a paper from the glove box and wrote, Paseo de la Reforma, 1247, 8th floor, Sarmiento Tech Solutions. Here's my number 2. If you need anything, call. And Jimena, wear something a little more formal. It doesn't have to be expensive. Just Office. She nodded fast and clutched the paper like a passport. Gracias, Señor Mateo. With all my heart, I promise I won't disappoint you. I know you won't, he said. She stepped out onto the sidewalk and turned at the door for one more look. See you Monday. See you Monday. The Mercedes pulled away. The rain looked lighter. The world did not change shape, but it moved differently under her feet. She ran inside to tell Alma that God sometimes answered prayers in leather seats. Monday came on fast. Jimena ironed the white shirt until it looked new. She chose the best black pants she owned, bought second-hand but perfect with care. She arrived 15 minutes early because arriving early was her love language. The lobby was glass and echoes. The 8th floor doors opened to a company that looked like a thing on a magazine page, gray and blue. Light pouring in, glass-walled rooms where ideas were supposed to happen. People moved with purpose, laptops open, coffee cups in hand. You must be Jimena, said a blonde woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a professional smile. I'm Sandra. I handle admin. Mateo told me about you. Buenos dias, Jimena replied. Mucho gusto. Just Sandra, the woman said. We're not too formal here. Come, let me show you around. They walked the floor. Names became faces. Faces became jobs. Programmers in hoodies who smiled without looking up. Designers with sketches like butterflies pinned to screens. Marketing people who spoke in big words and bigger hopes. The deep room with the big table where important people would sit and make decisions that would later be revised. The deep cleaning is done twice a week by an outside company, Sandra explained. Your job is more about the daily order. Keep the place coherent, stock supplies, take care of the kitchenette, help keep the boss's office sane. They reached Mateo's office at the end of the hall. It was simple and elegant, dark wood, bookshelves with titles that looked used, a leather sofa that had held a dozen small crises and one short nap, a window that watched the city do its morning. Jimena began instantly. She stocked pens. She organized sticky notes. She wiped surfaces until they were clean, and then again until they were clear. She labeled shelves no one had ever labeled. In the kitchenette, she made a place for everything and put everything there, then watched to see what people naturally did and moved things to meet reality. By lunch, the place felt calmer. People noticed the way people always notice when invisible labor makes their lives easier. It's nice to have someone who actually takes care of this stuff. Julia, a programmer with tired eyes, told Sandra. We were always out of paper, and I don't think I've ever seen the sink empty before noon. Who changed the water filter? Carlos from marketing demanded, holding up his glass as if it were a rare wine. It tastes like water now. At 9:30, Mateo walked in wearing a gray suit that made the room look less formal by comparison. He paused when he saw Jimena sorting a stack of mail. Buenos dias, Jimena, he said, and the way he said her name felt like a small welcome sign. How's it going? Muy bien, Señor Mateo, she replied. Everyone's very kind. Good. If you need anything, ask. He went into his office, and every few hours he came back out to talk to people, to read something on a screen, to hold a cup and think in a doorway. Whenever he passed her, he smiled. Sometimes he asked how she was adapting. She said fine, even the first day before her hands had learned where everything lived. At lunch, Sandra took Jimena and the admin team to a small place on the corner where the food tasted like all the kitchens people missed. He's a good boss, Sandra said after ordering. Fair, pays well, gives opportunities. If you want to grow, he notices. Have you been here long? Jimena asked. Since the beginning. 5 years. I started as a secretary. Now I run this chaos. Sandra smiled. Work hard, he values that. At the end of the day, Jimena wiped the kitchenette counters one more time because she liked to put the day away neat. Mateo walked in, opened the fridge, and took out a bottle of water like a man who had learned not to drink coffee after 4 if he wanted to sleep. How'd it go? He asked. It was wonderful, she said, and her smile was the kind that happens when security meets hope. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, he replied. I see you've already made the place more organized. Now that was fast. We have an important meeting tomorrow. Could you make the conference room perfect? Claro, she said. I'll leave it shining. He paused in the doorway. Jimena. Si, senor. Welcome to the team. She stood alone for a long moment after he left, smiling at a room that had no idea it had just become part of a story. Across the city that night, Estela Castañeda sat in a perfect apartment that smelled like expensive candles and the idea of success. She sipped wine and leafed through a glossy magazine because glossy things matched her self-image. On the walls, framed proof of what she thought she was. Diplomas, awards, invitations to rooms where people clapped for themselves. Her career looked clean. Her personal life was a string of knots. 2 years earlier, at a party where money walked around wearing shoes, she had noticed Mateo. She had chosen her dress to be noticed. She had done her hair to be admired. She stepped into conversations like someone who had practiced in a mirror. Mateo was polite. He was always polite. He was not interested. For Estela, no interest felt like a challenge, and challenge was the only love language she trusted. She positioned herself at dinners where he would be. She created professional pretexts to call. He replied when he had to. He never asked anything else. His indifference made something ugly grow in her. That morning, after leaving a hearing, she had passed by her own office and seen him through the window of the building next door. He watched the scene in which she fired Jimena. Estela had known Jimena for 3 years. Too kind, too liked, too good at making other people feel good. It irritated her. But watching Mateo look at that humble girl with concern was an electric shock to some part of her that only responded to jealousy. How could a man like him be interested in a woman like that? She set her wine down and picked up her phone. She knew people. She knew how to find things out. And if she couldn't find them out, she could make them up elegantly. If he wants to get involved with a maid, she whispered to nobody and everyone, I'll find everything about her past. If there isn't anything to find, I'll create it. The quiet war began with anonymous calls that sounded like favors. Just a heads up about an employee. You deserve to know who you've hired. There were problems. I don't want you to get hurt. The information was always vague because vagueness can sound like humility. It was enough to plant the first seeds of doubt. Inside Sarmiento Tech Solutions, life changed for Jimena in ways that had nothing to do with mops. The first month, she learned people's names and how they took coffee. The second, she built a system in her head for supplies and movement and mess that made sense in pattern and budget. The third, she didn't feel new anymore. She felt like the person who knew where the things lived and made sure they got home. She woke up at 6 with energy that the old job had never given her. She made coffee while Alma put water to boil for oatmeal. Buenos dias, abuela, she sang, and Alma shook her head and said, every day you look more alive. You look like you belong to yourself again. Me gusta el trabajo, Jimena said. People are kind. My boss is very respectful. He treats everyone the same. She didn't mention that sometimes her cheeks got warm when he smiled. Some things you protect with silence until they are strong enough to grow in the air. In the office, little problems found her and fell apart in her hands. A paper jam surrendered. The water cooler stopped sputtering. A quarterly meeting didn't run out of markers and embarrassment. Mateo noticed how she solved things without making noise about it. One afternoon, he stepped into the kitchenette where she was restocking cleaning supplies and said, Can I ask your opinion on something? My opinion? She nearly dropped the box. Si, senor. How would you organize my schedule better? I keep confusing times. She looked at him, at the quiet disaster of papers on his desk, at the inside-out stacks that meant he thought things through and left the evidence behind. A simple whiteboard, she said, weakly at a glance. Color coding by priority. Put it in your office where you can't ignore it. Make it happen, he said. After that, he asked more. Not constantly, not heavily. but enough that she felt seen for how her mind worked, not just how her hands did. He discovered she had an eye for the logic under clutter. She discovered he had a memory for the details of people's lives that made them feel real to him. They were both surprised by how easily they talked when they talked. The calls came more often. Sandra fielded the first serious one from a voice that preferred not to give a name. I don't want to cause trouble, but you need to know about Jimena, the woman said. She's been fired before, with cause. She has a pattern. After the fourth call in a week, Sandra went to Mateo's office. We've got someone calling about Jimena, she said. Always anonymous, always concerned, says she's trouble. What kind of trouble? Mateo asked, annoyance rising with caution in his chest. Nothing specific, just, you should know what kind of person she is. He looked through the glass and saw Jimena in the kitchenette, lining up mugs with unself-conscious care. The woman on the phone spoke like she wanted to help. The woman in the kitchenette moved like help was what she did. Do you think there's anything to it? Sandra asked. I don't know, he said. The Jimena I know doesn't match that, but I'll keep an eye on things. He did. He noticed she often knew who was in what meeting and who needed what kind of pen. He noticed that sometimes when he had a confidential call, she was within sight, wiping a counter or pretending to rearrange sugars that didn't need rearranging. One morning he arrived early and found her stacking papers on his desk. What are you doing? He asked, sharper than he meant. She jumped. Perdón, señor. Just making piles. It looked messy. Did you read anything? No, señor, she said quickly. Solo acomodé. He stared at the papers. Contracts, nothing explosive. It still made him uncomfortable. Next time, please don't touch my documents without telling me. Her face flushed. Perdón. It won't happen again. The air between them changed that day. Not cold, not warm, just not what it had been. Jimena felt the shift and went home with a sadness in her bones she could not name. Mateo regretted the sharpness and told himself the calls had put him in a bad mood. Then he told himself that people who run companies must trust their instincts even when they wish they didn't have to. Stella decided the time had come for her to step out from behind the curtain. On a Friday at 10 in the morning, she walked into the sleek lobby, her suit perfect, hair neat, a leather portfolio like a prop. Buenos dias, she said to Sandra with the smile people practice to say, I am important and safe. I'd like a word with Mateo Sarmiento. Do you have an appointment? Sandra asked, already suspicious of that smile. No, but I'm an attorney. Estella handed over a crisp card from a well-known firm. It's about something he'll want to hear. Sandra called Mateo's office. There's a lawyer here, she said. Estella. Castañeda. Do you know her? No, Mateo said. What's it about? She didn't say. He hesitated. Curiosity snapped a finger. Send her in. Estella entered the office as if she already had a contract signed. She glanced around at his bookshelves in the window and pretended not to be measuring him by his taste. Thank you for seeing me without notice, she said. How can I help you? He asked. I came to help you, she replied, crossing her legs and setting the portfolio on her lap like a promise. We move in the same circles, yes? People who understand how reputation works. He leaned back. Go on. It's about an employee, Jimena Morales. He sat up a little, so the calls had a face and a perfume. I don't like to speak ill of anyone, Estella said with a small pained expression that she had practiced in other mirrors. But she worked for me for 3 years. She was problematic, always inserting herself, speaking about things she didn't understand. Clients complained. It was a mess. I had to let her go. That doesn't sound like the Jimena I see, Mateo said. His voice was neutral. His eyes were not. She has a way of getting close to bosses, Estella continued, letting the insinuation glide into the room on expensive heels, especially when they are successful and unmarried. Something tightened in his chest. He liked Jimena. He liked liking Jimena. He didn't like how much he liked that he liked Humana. He didn't want to be a fool, not again. If you want more details, I can put you in touch with people, Estella offered. People who can confirm. After she left, Mateo stood at the window and watched the city pretend to be something you could understand from above. He looked out through the glass and saw Jimena in the kitchenette, laughing with two people from design. The laugh he had always thought of as honest now sounded in his head like a thing you could fake if you had a reason. He told himself he would get facts. He told himself facts would protect everyone. 2 weeks later, a courier delivered a brown folder thick with documents that looked official enough to tower over doubt. The note on the front said, "The information you requested." Inside, a reference from a hotel, fired with cause for theft, a letter from a cleaning company, complaints of inappropriate behavior, going through documents, flirting with clients, another sheet, another stamp, 3 companies, the same story, the same dirty suggestion, repeated in cleaner fonts. He called the first hotel. No record of her. He called the second company. Never employed anyone with that name. The third had changed names and had no memory. Sometimes places forget who they were when it is useful to forget. The papers felt like proof anyway, because paper with stamps always does. He avoided her all day. When she asked if everything was all right, he said, "Just busy," and looked at his screen like it was oxygen. She felt the space growing between them like a new wall inside a familiar room. At 5:30, when most of the office had thinned, he called her in. "Sit," he said, and his tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind. "Did something happen?" she asked. He opened the folder and pushed the top documents across the desk. "Can you explain these?" She leaned forward and read. Surprise turned to shock, and then to something that made her stomach twist. This isn't true," she whispered. She picked up another sheet with trembling fingers. "I've never worked at this hotel. I've never robbed anyone. This cleaning company? I've never even heard of it." 3 companies, he said. 3 places with similar complaints. You're telling me they made it all up? "Yes," she said, tears starting now because fear of losing something good tastes like metal. "Someone is doing this to hurt me." He wanted to believe her. He wanted to throw the folder away, to sweep it off his desk and let the papers scatter on the carpet like broken promises, and step on them and apologize with his whole life. But the papers were heavy in his hand. And the last time he had trusted someone, it had cost him things he still hadn't recovered. "I called the hotel," he said. "They don't have you on record." "Then you know it's a lie," she said desperately. "Or they kept bad records or they changed names." "I don't know. How can I prove I never worked somewhere? How can I prove a negative?" "You can't. Not in one meeting. Not with tears that people will call manipulative if they want to." He knew it. He hated knowing it. "I'm not going to fire you," he said finally, the words a small mercy wrapped in a heavier thing. "But I can't promote you right now. The reception work is suspended. Go back to cleaning. We'll sort this out." It felt like a slap. She stood on shaking legs, nodded because the body sometimes obeys when the soul breaks, and left. She cried in the elevator because it is a small place where tears can be private between floors. Mateo stared at the folder after she left and heard a voice in his head that sounded like the part of himself he liked least. "Better now than later," it said. "Better now than after the heart makes decisions the head cannot survive." Another voice, soft and stubborn, said, "You are losing something you didn't know you needed." He put the folder in a drawer and told both voices to be quiet. A week dragged. Mornings began with polite greetings that landed like pebbles in a pond and sank immediately. Jimena moved through the office like a ghost who had chores. Mateo closed his door when he didn't need to. At home, Alma watched her granddaughter sit at the table and stir soup that didn't need stirring. "Mi niña," Alma said finally. "What happened?" "Nothing," Jimena said. "Just tired." "I raised you," Alma replied softly. I know the difference between tired and wounded. Jimena told her everything, the calls, the folder, the expressions, the demotion. I'm thinking about looking for another job, she confessed. How do I prove I never did something? How do I argue with paper? The one who owes nothing fears nothing, Alma said, squeezing her hand. If your conscience is clean, the truth will find its way. And if it doesn't, then maybe he's not the man we hoped he was. Jimena lay awake that night and decided she would not drown quietly in a lie. On the other side of the city, Mateo lay awake too. He watched replay after replay in his mind of her face when he pushed the papers across the desk. He saw a person hurting. He did not see a con artist. He had been around good liars. Their sadness never looked like that. He called a private investigator he had used before for company matters. Roberto, he said, I need you to check something important. Thoroughly. He told the story from the beginning. The folder, the companies, the calls, the attorney with the practiced smile. Investigate all of it, he said. The companies, the documents, the woman who brought the story, and Jimena. I need the truth as it is, not as I want it to be. A week later, Roberto called back. I have answers, he said. He sounded almost cheerful, which can be an odd sound when delivering news that has weight. The hotel? Mateo asked. Closed 4 years ago, Roberto said. The letterhead was copied from an old brochure. The signature doesn't match any historical staff. The cleaning company? The RFC doesn't exist, Roberto replied. Someone mashed numbers. The third business? Name change, Roberto said. Never had a Jimena Morales employed. Documents in your folder are forgeries. Good ones. Still forgeries. Mateo's heart thumped. And Jimena? Neighbors, teachers, people from her neighborhood. Everyone says the same thing, Roberto said. Hardworking, honest, takes care of her grandmother. No drama. And the attorney, Mateo asked quietly. Estela. That's where it gets interesting, Roberto said. She has a pattern, strong interest in successful men. When they decline, she escalates. 2 years ago, an executive got a restraining order. Last year, a doctor changed gyms and cities. She paid 2 men in recent weeks to make anonymous calls to your office. I have bank transfers. Mateo set the phone down on his desk after the call and stared at nothing until the nothing turned into shame. He had doubted the wrong person. He had taken a lie and built a small wall out of it inside a relationship that hadn't even had time to say its name yet. He stood, grabbed his keys, and drove to Estela's office because there are apologies you give with your face to the person you wronged, and there are confrontations you deliver in person to the person who tried to burn down your house. He arrived at 10:30, walked through the same reception area where Jimena had been destroyed, and asked to see Estela. He did not sit. He did not let her make him wait. When she appeared with lip gloss and an expectation, he said, "We need to talk." In her office, he put a thin folder on the desk the way he had put a heavy one on his own last week. I investigated, he said. Those documents you sent are fakes. The hotel, the companies, lies, and I know you paid people to call. Estela's expression flickered. She tried to hold on to composure like a person tries to hold water in a paper cup. That's absurd, she said. Why would I do that? Because you are obsessed with me, he said, not raising his voice, and because I was getting close to someone who is not you. That's paranoid, she snapped. Why would I ever? I have a report, he said, on the men who had to file orders against you, on the transfers. It's all very documented. Her face went pale and then red in waves. I was only trying to protect you, she said. She is not for you. We are of the same level, Mateo. She's not. She is 10 of you, he said quietly, in character, in kindness, in basic decency. Don't talk to me like that, she hissed. I will talk to you exactly like this, he said. Leave me alone. Leave her alone. If you do anything else to hurt her, I go to the police with this. He turned and left. She called his name like someone who hears a door to a world closing and does not know how to live in the new one. He did not stop. On the drive back, he practiced the first words of the apology he owed Jimena and threw them away for the second words he owed her, and then threw those away too. When you've broken something fragile and good, words feel like tools you don't trust in your hands. He found her in the kitchenette wiping a spot that didn't exist on the table. Her shoulders slumped, her movements slow, as if even gravity had become heavier. Jimena, he said, and her name sounded like it used to again. She turned and looked at him as if he had found her in a room where the lights had been turned off. Si, Senor Mateo. Can you come to my office? He asked. I need to speak with you. Are you going to fire me? She asked, and even the way she braced for it broke him a little. No, he said. It's not that. She followed him in with legs made of fear. He closed the door and did not sit behind the desk. He stood in front of it like someone who refuses to hide behind wood and glass. I owe you an apology, he said, for this week, for believing lies, for doubting you. She blinked, confused. I don't understand. The documents were fake, he said. All of them. Estella falsified everything to separate us. Silence stretched and then broke into a half-sob, half-laugh in her chest. Fake? He explained the investigator. The companies that didn't exist, the men she had harassed, the transfers. He told her he had confronted Estella. He told her he had chosen wrong and was sorry. So you know I never did any of those things, she said. I know, he said, and I know I made the worst mistake I could have made with you. Her eyes filled, and this time the tears tasted like relief. This week was terrible, she whispered. I thought I had done something to deserve it. I almost looked for another job. You did nothing wrong, he said. The wrong was mine. Can you forgive me? He asked quietly. She looked at him and saw the sincerity she had missed in his eyes for 7 days that felt like 7 months. Yes, she said, I can. They stood in the soft quiet that follows storms and tried to believe that apologies can be a beginning, not just an ending. What now? She asked. Do we pretend the last week didn't happen? If you want, he said, we can go back to before, or I can say something I should have said even if there had been no lie. I need you in my life, not just at work. Her cheeks warmed. There's a difference between us, she said softly. People talk. They always will, he replied. What matters is the truth we make together. Do you feel anything for me? She met his eyes slowly. Much, she said. More than I should. Then maybe we try, he whispered, carefully, honestly. She smiled for the first time in a week. I'd like to. The phone rang. Sandra's voice came through the intercom. Mateo, there's a woman here who says she's a journalist. She wants to ask about an employee. He and Jimena exchanged a look. Estella was not going to give up her story easily. Tell her to come up, Mateo said. The journalist was in her 40s, with a notebook that looked like it had survived more truths than any one person should have to carry. Buenas tardes, she said. We received an anonymous tip about fraud by an employee, Jimena Morales. I want to hear your version before we publish anything. The tip is false, Mateo said calmly. It's part of a pattern from someone with a personal obsession. Can you elaborate? The journalist asked, pen ready like a blade for lies and a blanket for truths. He told her what he could without breaking laws of privacy. He gave her names she could call for verification. He did not give her Jimena's tears because those belonged to Jimena. That's a story, the journalist said quietly, closing her notebook. Not the one I walked in to write. The right one. Thank you. When she left, Jimena sank into the chair with a sigh that felt like the end of a marathon. She won't stop, she said. Women like that don't stop. I know, Mateo said. So, we make an end. How? He looked at the calendar. The inauguration of the new branch is Friday night. Everyone important will be there. If we invite Estella and we tell the truth in front of everyone, We ended on our terms. She can't call a journalist every week when there's a room full of people who heard the facts. Invite her? Jimena asked, eyes wide. She's capable of anything. She's also incapable of resisting attention, he replied. I'll tell her I have more proof and want to talk in person. She'll come. That night they planned. He called Estela, faked coldness, said just enough to fan her hope. She said yes with a voice that thought it was winning. The hotel ballroom looked like success had been poured into it. Round tables, white tablecloths, a stage for speeches. Glass clinked. Laughter floated. People who liked to be seen were seen. Jimena arrived in a blue dress that made her look like the calmest part of the evening sky. Mateo had wanted to buy it for her. She had wanted to refuse. They had landed on a compromise. They would call it a thank you for saving his sanity last week. Who's that? Someone whispered when she walked in. Someone from the company, another murmured. Looks special. Estella arrived at 8, beautiful in a way that thought beauty could be a weapon that always worked. She found Mateo with a group of CEOs and moved between them like a person who believed gravity was optional. Mateo, she said, radiant. Estella, he replied. So glad you came. Let's enjoy first. We'll talk later. He was cool to Jimena in her sightline on purpose. Jimena pretended to be ill at ease. Estella watched and fed herself satisfaction. See, she whispered to Mateo when they were briefly alone. She doesn't fit here. It's obvious. You might be right, he said flatly, and that was the last lie he told for a long time. At 10, Mateo stepped onto the small stage and put a hand on the microphone. The room quieted because rooms like this have learned to obey microphones. Buenas noches, he began. Thank you for being here to celebrate our new branch. Before we talk numbers and plans, I want to share something personal I learned recently. Estella's smile spread. She imagined him thanking her for saving him from a mess. I received information about someone very important to me, he continued, information that said terrible things about her character. It came from a source that presented itself as concerned. As respectable, Estella nodded almost invisibly to herself, savoring the plot she believed she had written. But when I investigated that information thoroughly, he said, voice even, I discovered every piece was a lie, crafted, purchased, designed by someone who does not accept rejection, someone with a pattern of harassment and fabrication, someone who tried to ruin a good person, and sound in the crowd that was not quite a gasp. Heads turned. Estella's face went still. Tonight, I want to say publicly, Jimena Morales is one of the most honest, hard-working people I have ever known. Anyone who attempted to stain her name will answer for it. People looked for Jimena. She stood and walked toward the stage as if she had been practicing dignity her whole life, and tonight was the recital. Some people clapped. Some people felt ashamed because they had whispered when they should have wondered. Estella realized she had been brought to a stage where she was not the speaker. She moved through the crowd toward the doors without looking behind her. Let me end with this, Mateo said. Sometimes the most valuable person is right in front of you, but you let other voices talk you out of what your heart already knows. I almost made that mistake. I won't make it again. He held out his hand. Jimena joined him on the small stage. From the floor, it looked like the simplest thing, a boss thanking an employee. From the stage, it felt like a promise. The buzz afterward was thick and messy. Did you know about Estella? Someone whispered to a man who had once believed everything his circles told him because they always spoke with confidence. I always thought she was intense, another remarked. Remember Dr. Ricardo? She wouldn't leave him alone. Stories that had been kept private because they were inconvenient began to move through the room. Estella tried to leave quietly. People stopped her. Is it true? When they asked. He has proof, she said, then realized how that sounded and said, it's a misunderstanding, and then realized that sounded worse and fled. Monday morning, phones at Estella's office began to teach her about consequences. We're canceling, a construction company said. It's not about your work. It's Image. We'll be seeking other counsel, a logistics firm said. We prefer to avoid controversy. Tuesday, two more. Wednesday, a partner demanded a meeting to discuss vacation. By the end of the week, the woman who had built a life on the idea that she was indispensable learned how quickly circles form and unform around people who treat others like scaffolding. At Sarmiento, the truth moved through the company in a kinder way. People hugged Jimena without words. That woman did you dirty, Julia said, fists tight in small rage. I'm glad the boss said it right, Sandra added. I'm glad you didn't quit, Carlos said. We need you. Jimena smiled and said thank you, and then went to the kitchenette and cried quietly, and then came back out and made coffee, because life goes on in cups that need washing. 3 weeks later, with the dust settling and the office feeling normal again, Mateo asked Jimena to dinner at a place that had cloth napkins and prices he didn't want her to see. You seem different tonight, she said halfway through grilled fish and soft music. Nervous. A little, he admitted. I need to tell you something important. She set her fork down slowly. What kind of important? He took her hand across the table and did not let go, even though his mind started listing scenarios where letting go would be safer. I fell in love with you, he said, completely. Her eyes went wide in the way hope makes eyes wider. You did. I did, he said, for your honesty, your strength, the way you treat everyone, even the way you put sugar packets in neat little squares. She laughed and then covered her mouth and then let the laugh be. Since the first day, she admitted, I didn't think someone like you would ever. Someone like me? He teased softly. Rich men don't usually notice the woman who fills the sugar, she said. Then rich men are fools, he replied. He kissed her hand. A couple at the next table smiled and pretended not to. He told her his mother was coming next week and wanted to meet her. She panicked because mothers and class and expectations can break people before they even open their mouths. He told her not to be afraid. We'll face it together, he said, and she believed him. Doña Elena arrived from Querétaro on a Thursday with a small suitcase and a heart that had learned how to be proud without being cruel. Mateo took her to Alma's house because he wanted his mother to meet Jimena, where Jimena was strong at home. Mucho gusto, Jimena said at the door, trying not to smooth her hair again. The pleasure is mine, Elena replied. May I call you Jimena? Claro. Mateo doesn't stop talking about you, Elena said. He says you are. Very special. They talked awkward at first and then less awkward. Elena understood hard work. Alma understood love. By the time coffee was poured, the two older women were talking like people who recognized themselves across differences. I raised her since 15, Alma said. Her parents died in an accident. There was nothing to do but live. I raised Mateo alone, Elena replied. It is hard. It is, Alma said, but you do it because love makes you brave. After they left, Elena pulled her son aside. She is exactly who you said, she said. A girl of gold. If you are happy, I am happy. You don't mind the difference? He asked. Hee-ho, she said, and smiled a little. I taught in public schools my whole life. I can read character. Gracias, Mama, he said, relief loosening something inside him. Do one thing, she added. Don't take too long to propose. Women like that are rare. 3 months later, he took her to the plaza where she had played as a girl and knelt on the stones that had watched her run in shoes too small for the big path she was walking. Jimena, he said, voice not perfectly steady, and that made it better. These months with you have been the best of my life. Will you marry me? She stared, then laughed, then cried, then said yes, so loudly that a vendor under a yellow umbrella clapped without thinking what the applause meant. They told Alma at home. Abue, we have news, Jimena said, holding up her hand. The ring simple because simple things hold better, and perfect because perfect things do not have to be big to be true. Dios mío, Alma cried, hands to her mouth, then to their faces. My niña, at last. She cried. Mateo cried. Jimena cried. The neighbor's dog barked because sometimes joy sounds like danger if you are not used to it. They chose a small church in the heart of the neighborhood, the one where Alma had once stood and promised things she had kept until they borrowed her last breath. Jimena wore a dress that looked like kindness when it learns how to look pretty. Mateo wore a suit that made him look like someone who understood responsibility and joy were not enemies. The priest spoke about love as if it were a daily act of courage. In joy and in sorrow, he said, and they both said, I do, to both sides of the sentence without flinching. They kissed to applause that sounded like family. Sandra wiped her eyes. Julia said, finally, out loud. Elena pressed Alma's hand and felt her pulse race with gratitude. Outside, rice and rose petals in the air, music that made even shy people move their shoulders. The reception was in the church courtyard, with food that tasted like every kitchen someone missed and songs that had lived in these streets longer than any of them. No luxury, all love. A year and a half later, Jimena woke early in a bigger house that still felt like the small house had moved in with them. She made coffee. Nervous, Mateo said, kissing her cheek. Happy, she replied. It was the day they would open the doors of a dream they had built in memory of Alma, the Alma Morales Institute, a training center for unemployed women, administration classes, childcare, computer literacy, confidence. They cut a ribbon in front of a building near where Jimena had grown up. Women filled the small hall with the sound of possibility. Gracias por estar aquí, Jimena said at the microphone. Words steady, hands only a little less so. We are here to give the kind of opportunity I was given when I needed it most. Elena watched her daughter-in-law and thought of her own mother, gone long years now. Sandra smiled because competence is beautiful. Employees who had become friends cheered because cheering for someone else is a sign you are not as lonely as you fear. My grandmother always said God doesn't abandon honest work, Jimena added. I believe that. I also believe we need someone to see us and open a door sometimes. Today, we open doors. Later on the porch of their house, they watched the evening move in. Do you think she would have been proud? Jimena whispered, looking at the photo of Alma above the bookshelf, where Alma smiled in 3 sizes. She is, Mateo said. Pride fills rooms. Can't you feel it? She left in peace, Jimena said softly. Alma had gone 6 months after the wedding in her sleep, the way people hope to leave when they have nothing left to put away. It had hurt. It had also healed something to know she had seen her granddaughter safe. What are you thinking? Mateo asked, threading his fingers through hers. That life is strange, Jimena said. 2 years ago, I was a cleaning lady who had been humiliated in a room where my voice didn't count. Today I'm married, studying, opening a center. You were always more than a cleaning lady, he replied. You just needed a place to be that in public. They sat in the quiet that people earn. They knew there would be bills. There would be arguments that didn't end in one conversation. There would be days when the Institute struggled and the company annoyed and the city pushed back. They also knew that love with truth was heavier and stronger than anything Estella could ever throw at them. Estella tried one more time, a defamation suit, a letter elegant in its aggression. Mateo invited her attorney to a meeting and set down printed bank records, transfer receipts, investigator notes. We withdraw, the attorney said the next day, quietly. Quiet is a kind of justice, too. At the Institute, the first class of 20 women came a little scared and left a little less. One brought her child, a 5-year-old with serious eyes who stood near the door like a guard. Do you like your mom's class? Jimena asked the boy in the break. He nodded. Do you think she'll find a job she likes? Another nod. Do you know that she's brave? A longer nod. Do you know that you are too? The boy thought about that and then nodded again. It's good to watch a person believe a new thing about themselves for the first time. Time moved as it does when people build things. The Institute grew. Not fast, not slow, just right. The company expanded by a branch. Jimena enrolled in an administration program because dreams you speak out loud eventually make you fill out forms. She did homework at the table at night and laughed when Mateo tried to explain something in Excel that she had already done by hand because hands sometimes beat software for beauty. When it rained, sometimes the sound made her chest tight. She would stand by the window and watch drops snake down the glass and remember a day when rain and humiliation were the same thing. Then she would turn and look at the life built out of something Estella never understood: dignity. One afternoon, as storm clouds stacked and the Institute's hallway filled with the smell of wet cement and soap, a woman lingered at the door after class. "Senora Jimena," she said, "I almost didn't come today. I thought, people like me don't belong in places like this." "People like you built the world," Jimena said. "This is your place, always." The woman smiled and left with shoulders a little higher. Sometimes when Mateo walked through the office, he would still feel a small stab of shame if his eye caught a brown folder on someone's desk. He kept one of the forged letters in a drawer as a reminder, not of Estela, but of himself, of how easy it is to believe paper over people, of how much courage it takes to ask the person in front of you for their truth, instead of letting a stranger narrate who they are. On the anniversary of the night everything turned, they went back to the bus stop where a black Mercedes had pulled over for a girl with a plastic bag. The bench was the same. The sky threatened rain again, but held it. Jimena sat where she had sat and took a breath. "If a stranger pulled up today," she asked, "and offered help, would you still get in?" "Yes," Mateo said, smiling, "because you taught me to listen for the right kind of voice. And if a new lie walked into your office wearing a suit and a good haircut?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'd call you first," he replied. "Then I'd call Roberto. Then I'd call my mother." They laughed and went for tacos in a place where no one cared who they were as long as they paid and said gracias. If someone tried to rewrite your past with a stamped letter and a concerned tone, who would you be in this story? The person who believed the envelope? The person who asked the person? The one who stood on a stage and told the truth with their whole mouth? Or the one who walked into the rain and said, "Get in, I'll take you home"? Whatever your answer, remember this the next time a storm tries to make a lie sound like thunder. Truth isn't louder, but it lasts longer. And sometimes when you least expect it, it pulls up to the curb with warm air and a simple question that changes everything.